When I was growing up, I used to have Ferrari and Lamborghini posters all over my bedroom wall. It was a fantasy of what one day might be. Now, as a grown man obsessed with espresso culture, those car posters, well, they still remain, but phone wallpapers of machines from the likes of Slayer and La Marzocco have slowly taken their place. So recently, as many of you know, I was lucky enough to take ownership of this beautiful custom Slayer single group. I've been using it for 5 months to brew espresso every day. I've done everything I could to put this machine to the test to provide you with an honest and open review. So today, I want to share what my experience has been, both good and bad, and who I think the Slayer is for. Before we dive into this, if you enjoy the content or what I do here, the easiest way to support is watching, liking, and sharing this video with friends or on social media. And subscribing if you haven't already. That stuff really does make a massive difference. And if you want to support even further, you can even become a patron or drop a super thanks down below. And here's a picture of a cute coffee cup to say thanks for listening to that. Starting off with the design of the Slayer is, I think, a smart place to start. While not everybody might agree, I do believe the Slayer is really, really beautiful. And at the very least, undeniably unique. There's no missing the Slayer's feet that resemble two large X's on both sides of the machine. It's an iconic look that I think gives it a modern approach while also being functional. Now this allows for the machine to be low in profile so you can talk to a customer across a coffee bar and separated from the countertop. And speaking of modern, the Slayer uses a small touchscreen at the back of the drip tray to display information like live PID temp. With the push of the circle outline on the screen, you have access to dozens of options through the menus like adjusting brew temp and steam pressure, adjusting the pump pressure, setting automatic pre-brew times and sleep schedule to save power when not in use, our typical first world espresso machine stuff. And at the front of the machine is an iconic brew paddle. Now we'll talk more about how this works in detail shortly, but it's wrapped in a beautiful European ash, handcrafted in Seattle to match the curvature of the brew group cap. And the other wood accents are also made in Seattle as well. And then there's the bodywork, which is all made of thick steel, a drip tray that utilizes a shot mirror built into the transition into the body, a single gauge that displays the manometer or relative pressure at the group head, and then two arms, one for steam and one for hot water. Now, if we're talking about design with the Slayer, I don't think we can miss the build quality. Everything is really thick with big metal parts and beautifully finished wood accents. Now for context, this machine weighs 110 pounds. Delivering it was no joke and quite honestly wasn't fun to receive. Now weight doesn't determine quality, but it does speak to how thick the materials are, right? And the density of what is being used, even like the capacity of the machine. But quite honestly, the materials are what you'd expect for the money. This isn't a cheap machine. So everything feels like it'll last a lifetime and be capable in a commercial setting as you would expect, pulling dozens, if not hundreds of shots a day. Now, as you probably noticed, I opted to get mine customized. It doesn't come in white, it comes in silver with black sides. You can get them directly customized from Slayer with different wood options and paint, but that can be a long wait time and a little more expensive. So I actually got mine sourced directly from I Drink Coffee Canada. This isn't sponsored by any means. Slawic and the team at I Drink are now friends of mine, and they're just really cool people, so check them out. Now, back to the Slayer, even unique things like heating elements are supposedly more durable. Where most machines use copper heating elements, Slayer opts for a supposed 3-layer specified metal. They don't really say what that metal is, but they offer videos online showing Slayer's elements outlasting the competition. Although, to be fair, these videos are from Slayer directly, so that should be taken with a slight bias. I still think it's pretty interesting. Now, speaking of the boiler, the internals of the Slayer are organized to honestly another level. I've taken apart many machines and worked on beautiful German engineered brewers, but Slayer has outdone themselves. It's funny actually, anytime friends come over, especially if they're into espresso, I'll lift the cup tray or pop the hood, if you will, and allow them just to see the internals like the stainless steel, the copper, and just the clean organization of this machine. I don't know, it's something I'm proud of, like a nice car with a clean engine bay. I'm weird. I get it, I'm weird. Now, honestly, that touchscreen is one area that concerns me for longevity, but we're gonna talk more about that later in this video when we talk about my user experience. Now, their founder, Jason Prefontaine, was determined to make an espresso machine that could, quote, make better coffee. So he set out to engineer and design a machine that could change the way we brew espresso. More specifically, represent the flavors he was experiencing on the cupping table. And thus, the needle valve espresso machine was born. Now, speaking of the needle valve, this is truly what makes the Slayer unique. This allows us to adjust the pre-brew flow with the twist of the small blue knob under the cup tray. So right now, I have it set to 2 milliliters a second on pre-brew, and when I open to full pressure, it's about 9.5 milliliters a second. Now, this really opens up so many possibilities for how we can grind for our coffee, how lightly our espresso roast can be without under extraction, and honestly creating well-rounded and delicious flow profile shots. you know, it's not an overhyped thing. Flow profiling really is the real deal. And no, Slayer isn't the only one able to do this. It uses a stainless steel 3.3 liter 1300 watt steam tank and a 1.1 liter 600 watt brew boiler. Now that's massive, and both admittedly over excessive for the home. Now the steam has been really powerful with creating some of the best and honestly easiest textured milk I've had the privilege of creating on a home machine. Compared to the Bianca, it can take almost half the time with much more consistent results. And the saturated group provides fantastic temperature stability. And while I don't have a SCASE to prove it, though it's noticeable against an E61 when pulling a few back-to-back shots, as the coffee is noticeably more consistent in temperature at first sip. Again, this is non-analytical, but for me to notice this right away, I thought it spoke volumes. And since this uses a rotary vane pump, you're able to adjust the pressure at the pump, not only mechanically, but also electronically. And this is really convenient when swapping from your traditional 9-bar profiles to a more modern turbo shot. And speaking of that, let's talk about the espresso that it creates. If pulling consistent 9-bar profiles is your preference, the Slayer will do it with ease, but honestly, you're likely better to spend your money elsewhere. Where the Slayer truly wins is in its flow control abilities, like adjusting the needle valve to pull long 20+ second pre-infusions, or Slayer style shots, or Londinium style, or even ramping pressure down at the end of a shot. And when this is done right, flow controlled shots on the Slayer are as expected. They're delicious, they're rounded, they're sweet, and they're often well extracted. Now, by no means am I saying this is the only machine that can flow profile. And while it was one of the first, or at least one of the first semi-automatic machines to flow profile, there are many more affordable options today, and you definitely don't need to spend as much on a Slayer to get beautifully great, tasty shots. I think what really stood out to me for the Slayer was its ability to flow profile espresso consistently over dozens of shots. As somebody who plans to use this in a commercial setting, now more on that another time, that was really important to me. On a bar, you can program the Slayer to have set pre-brew time, so turning the paddle all the way left will automatically flow profile your set time. Now, while the Elite Bianca is 1/3 the price and has all the flexibility and more of the Slayer's needle valve, it does lack the commercial ability to do the things I need it to do. But if I were just talking about espresso abilities alone and not including the thermal stability, other machines would win, the Bianca likely being one of them. But for me, the Slayer's shots are exactly what you'd expect. They're so delicious. In fact, here's an idea. Let me walk you through how I brew espresso on the Slayer step by step, and while I do, I'll tell you about the sponsor of today's video, which is Squarespace. Now we're gonna start off by grinding our coffee fresh, which is so important no matter what espresso machine you're using, and we're gonna grind it fresh on the P100 from Option O to grind up our espresso. Now maybe you need a website for an e-commerce store, a small business, or maybe it's just a personal idea like a coffee blog, whatever it might be, I recommend checking out Squarespace. Let's knock this coffee out with the knocker built into the grinder, and we're gonna distribute this with the Weiss distribution tool to ensure that the coffee grounds are nice and even and fluffy. Now, it is so easy to make a website on Squarespace. I can't recommend it enough. I don't know how to code. Maybe you don't either. You just simply implement your photos, your videos, and your ideas on one of their wonderful templates, sign up for a free trial, and make something beautiful. Now, right here, we're gonna wait for our first drips. Once we see those first drips, we're going to then ramp up our pressure all the way to the left. Now, I've been using Squarespace for years for both personal and for work, and anytime I've had an issue, they have fantastic customer service. But I would challenge you to put my word to the test. Go use the link down below for a free trial and create a wonderful website. And when you're ready to launch, use code Kyle at checkout for 10% off your website or domain. Go do it, go make something amazing, and thank you Squarespace so much for sponsoring this video. Now, having owned and used many espresso machines over the years, one of the most important aspects of owning an espresso machine is the feel of using it. The Slayer is fully operated and actuated by the brew paddle. There's no on and off switch for water flow. Everything is controlled by the paddle on the brew group. Now with the slide to the left, it gives you a satisfying click at center for pre-brew, and then sliding even further, another click for full pressure. Now, I was a bit skeptical of this design at first, but it truly is a satisfying experience sliding the brew paddle to control your water flow. The bearings and movements of the paddle is resistant enough to feel premium, but smooth enough to not cause strain or fatigue, especially in a bar setting. Now, the steam wand is actuated by a large wooden lever. At first pull, it often releases a lot of condensation from the long travel line. Not something I love, to be honest, but this is fairly common on machines like this. But once that condensation is gone, the steam is dry and powerful. Now, I do wish that the Slayer came with an anti-burn steam arm stock. I understand that it would affect the steaming power and speed, but for home users, it would be a nice touch. That said, I've never had any milk crust on my Slayer steam wand. I'm not sure if there's a different coating or a different design that limits this. It gets really hot, but rarely crusts milk over like other machines I've used without this feature. Now the cup tray works fine. with lots of space for all my favorite coffee mugs. It warms them up real nice and toasty. And then behind that cup tray is the screen. And if I'm honest, this is where a lot of my frustrations with the Slayer come from. It's a beautiful display that is well placed and thought out, but I find the touch actuators just be a little too picky. Depending on how large your hands are, I can find the screen not to read my gestures every time I use it. I have grown accustomed on how to press and where I need to press, but it can be a bit annoying that this is even a thing. I would love to see an updated Slayer screen in the next few years, and one that is swappable for current Slayer users. Maybe something with OLED, or maybe a more updated look for this decade. A big ask possibly, but their price is also a big ask as well. Now currently I have the machine on sleep most of the day, except when I plan to use it in the morning and early afternoon. But at night I had to install a smart switch to cut the power to the machine, as I'd rather it not be in sleep overnight. Also, the Slayer single group does not come with an integrated water tank. So for me, this was all right, as I opted to plumb in a 5-gallon jug of third wave water. Actually, let me show you that setup. Okay, so in this closet right here, which is directly under my brew bar, this is where all the water magic happens for my espresso machine. Are you ready to see it? Let's check it out. This is also where I store my kids' toys. So this is right here, a 5-gallon distilled water tank that I fill and remineralize with third wave water, and I use the espresso packet, this one right here. Now, this is all a system done by a company called Cafe Works, which that's their logo right there. They're based out of California, and I purchased this while purchasing my Slayer because I wanted something that was really well done, and this was really classy. So they do all the piping and pumping and accumulator tank, all of that. So what's happening here is it's getting pumped out into a DDP 5800 Aquatech pump, which is putting it into an accumulator, which is that black pump behind it. Now the accumulator has a lot of benefits, but one of those being consistent line pressure so that the machine doesn't have to turn on the pump every time you use it. It's really convenient, it keeps it quiet, and there's a lot of benefits to the accumulator. And that runs to this blue piping right here, which runs up behind the espresso machine. The wastewater from the espresso machine goes into another one of those that's actually underneath the brew bar, but that'll change. We're gonna probably plumb that into our sink lines eventually. If you have any questions on how any of this works, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try to help you with any of those. Hopefully that helps. So let's wrap this up. I brewed for 5 months on the Slayer, brewed hundreds and hundreds of coffees, and I'm happy to say I'm really impressed. The Slayer isn't without its flaws, like its okay touchscreen and lack of non-burn steam arm, but outside of those two things and maybe the price, everything else about the Slayer is just wonderful. Now, the big question, do I wish I had gotten the La Marzocco GS3 instead? The question that you're probably all wondering. No, not really. I truly think it's a beautiful, wonderful machine, and I would honestly be honored to own one, but I personally don't love the operation of the conical valve and its known issues with thermal stability and sticky paddle adjustments. That's nitpicking, and that's a conversation for another time. Plus, the Slayer is primed for commercial volume, and I need that. I absolutely need that. For me, the simplicity of being able to pre-program pre-brews and just the ease of use for flow profiling was a huge draw on the Slayer. Now, if you want more thoughts on that, I covered that in my first impressions of the Slayer, which you can watch right up here. Now, be sure to hit that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe for more content on the Slayer, and honestly, just all things espresso. And I want to hear from you. Don't just watch, interact. Let me know in the comments any thoughts you might have. Share this with a friend or on social media, and if you do, tag me. Be sure to check out the Patreon down below if you want to support the channel even further and win some coffee here in the process. Also, be sure to join the free Home Barista Discord. That's also linked down below. We'll see you guys all in the next video. Peace.